Yeah.
Welcome everyone to the Wednesday morning series. Thrilled to have Troy Love back again today on the webinar series. Troy, I just did point someone this morning towards your drop-in group on Friday morning. So Troy hosts the drop-in group for men on Friday mornings about attachment wounds. You know, it's for recovery, but with that focus. And so that's just one of the offerings. And there's guys that show up regularly for a long period of time on that and the other drop-in groups. Those are all free. You'll find them on our website. He also facilitates the online work group, and that's different. That is for there's a low cost fee, but it is live facilitated via Zoom, and it's a series of 6 times that they'll meet. Again, that's on our website. That's coming up in March, isn't it?
It's coming up in a couple of weeks.
Okay, yeah. So please consider that. And if you've got questions about any of that, don't hesitate to ask. But it's different than doing a drop-in group or different than watching a webinar in that you will process through things, you'll have homework, you'll ask questions. You know, it's not treatment or therapy, but it really does help, be a little more individualized, for the work to do. That is not one that we recommend for people who are still like that really need sex addiction 101 or porn addiction 101, because get a foundation of recovery, of stopping, and then start doing some of that deeper work and putting those puzzle pieces together. So consider those separately. Since we don't have questions yet, we have a new betrayed partner offering starting in April. It's about boundaries,
Mm.
internal boundaries and external boundaries. Debbie McCrae is teaching it. She's fantastic. And that will be super helpful because there's so much confusion and misinformation about what boundaries are and aren't. And so getting the opportunity to navigate, what those are on a personal basis will be helpful. Separately, the betrayed partner work group starts next week with Angela Spearman. There are spots left for that as well. And one more public service announcement, Maddie Corman from Accidentally Brave. She has both a book on that. She did an off-Broadway play. She has a book, and she has an HBO Max show, or yeah, I've got the link. It's posted on our, and she is doing a 1 hour really special webinar. It's at an off time next week, Monday, at noon. She's going to come on and answer questions because her book and the story are about 10 years ago when all of this happened. And so this will be her ability to answer questions, but also kind of the rest of the story, the progress, since that time. So, and I love the title, Accidentally Brave. This is, for betrayed partners, they end up being brave where they didn't plan on being brave. And so I thought it was a great title. And, and she's, a pretty awesome woman. I've had the opportunity to speak with her, and I'm really looking forward to that. So along with all the other things, we've had Candace Christensen with neurodivergence, and Leilani Sinclair with, adult children. So we keep having, special edition webinars for your consideration too. So, but Troy, we've got questions.
We
I'm a
do.
betrayed partner. We have been married for 50 years. D-Day was 8 months ago. How do I know if I'm trauma bonded?
That's a beautiful question. So because I don't know anything about your particular situation, I can just talk about what trauma bonds are. They typically occur when you're in an abusive relationship, where the victim forms an emotional attachment with the perpetrator. So there's and the way that that kind of gets played off is that there are good times and then there's really bad times. And so the bond happens stronger and stronger because of lots of different reasons. But um, the bond happens through that in that abusive relationship, and so then it can make it really hard for the person to then leave, um, uh, the victim to leave because they feel some connection to that. So um, if that is situation that's going on with you, then you can go to therapist and talk about them. Probably the biggest example of that is called the Stockholm syndrome, where if you're not familiar with that, the Stockholm syndrome took some it's been a long time that I've read that, but there were some hostages that were taken hostage in like a bank heist or something like that, and then the hostages formed a connection with the people who had hijacked them, and they felt sorry for them and they felt compassion for them, so they built a relationship with the people that were causing them harm. So they call that Stockholm syndrome. So I don't know how to tell you whether you were trauma bonded. I'm guessing since you've been married for 50 years and you just discovered 8 months ago that this happened, that there's been a lot of trauma around that. In particular, you've had 50 years of a committed relationship, and now all of this has come out. And so you're probably wondering, well, what do I do with all of this? And what do I do with the 50 years of marriage that I had? And how much of that was real? Like, there's probably so many questions that you're going through. And you may want to attend one of the drop-in groups for betrayed partners or go to the class that we have for betrayed partners to really start to get an understanding of what's going on with you. But I don't know if I would want to pathologize your 50 years of relationship, um, and say that you're trauma bonded, especially since I have absolutely no information about your situation. But to maybe get some specific help with somebody who you can share your relationship with and see if that is. But just because you were betrayed does not necessarily mean you are trauma bonded.
Yeah, thanks. I was listening to a podcast this morning. There's no 12 step for podcasts, thank God, because I listened to too many podcasts. But anyway, I was listening to a podcast this morning, and there was actually a really good example of trauma bonding. It was a young girl, like 19 years old, who had been manipulated into sharing online um uh
Oh yeah.
content, let's let you know, and and it was absolutely, if you tell anyone, I'm going to come after you and your family and all of this. And she talks about, because it he got arrested, and he was terrible, but she said, I was engaged in conversation with him because he was the only person who knew. He was the only person who understood. So I mean, it was just this really like I get it, and you're also just mortified that that happened. So I love that what you're sharing about that is, you've been bonded for, you've been married 50 years, so 50 plus years, you've been together and bonded, and you have this whole history, and now you're traumatized. I did include the online work group. I would really encourage you to dig in on the betrayed partner work group that starts next week. I think it will be really helpful to understand what sex addiction is and isn't, have some help with boundaries and communication and all of those things. It's very helpful for getting, some support and foundation around that. Angela Spearman, who she did a two-part webinar on resentments a couple weeks ago, and she shared with the work groups. She said, I do about a half an hour of teaching, and then we do an hour of conversation, and and working through things. So this is not just, you're getting lectured at. This is, really unpacking some things for the individuals, and the participants find it really helpful. So really encourage you with that. And yes, lean into, like Troy said, the drop-in groups. You're here on a webinar, and that's nice, but you're just listening to us, we're, connecting. I'm subbing in on the betrayed partner drop-in group tomorrow morning. Would love to have you join. But any of them that work for your time schedule would be, you'd be welcome at. So, okay, next question. Richard Schwartz talks about changing the function of our parts from protectors to cheerleaders who encourage us as we move into our pain and other shadows to do our work there. Can you explain how to convert our parts into cheerleaders?
Yeah, so that comes from internal family systems. And full disclosure, I'm not trained in internal family systems. The model I do, maybe sounds familiar. So with the Finding Peace model, we talk about the shadows of shame, which are the voices of shame that tell you that you're bad and not, there's something wrong with you and all those things. But when you have a conversation with them and you understand why they're telling you those things, what they're doing is they're trying to protect you from being rejected, neglected, abandoned, betrayed. And so you can understand that those parts, as it were, have been trying to protect you from experiencing pain. And then you can offer gratitude to them. Kind of where me and Richard diverge is um, that I don't believe that the shadows are a part of you. I believe that they are outside of you, but that your light and your truth is part of you, and that's who you really are. And so part of getting into that cheerleader part is connecting with your own actual light, your own actual truth, and connecting with that I'm enough and I matter and I have purpose, and there are people in my life that I can lean on for support, and there are people in my life who lean on me. And so I want to be the best me I can be. And so I'm going to encourage myself, and I'm going to love on myself, and I'm going to practice self-compassion. And so really connecting with yourself and that light that's inside is part of how you do that. I'm not sure how Richard would tell you to do that because again, I'm not connected with internal family systems as much, but I would imagine that there's still a component of compassion that goes with that and finding a way to be kind to those parts of yourself.
So I put in the chat, we have the men's internal family systems and sexual integrity discussion group on Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Patrick Cagle hosts that one, and he is trained in IFS. So that would be a great question to bring up in that. And I also included a link to all of our various drop-in groups, for both partners and addicts as well. So, okay, next question. It seems like my addict partner was anxious. No, wait. It seems like my addict partner was the anxious one in previous relationships, staying in a relationship for 20 years that he deemed unhealthy. And then after a breakup in a different relationship, he continued to pay the bills for, hang out with, and take care of the kids for someone he briefly dated. In our relationship, he's avoidant to the max. Any argument can turn into, I can't do this anymore, I'm done, and him walking out the door and drive away. I find this incredibly unfair and it makes me angry. Is it because he feels so safe with me? He's never questioned or needed to question my loyalty or honesty, even after discovery when I stayed with him. It has me feeling less valued and wanted than his exes that he stayed around for and with them. And with me, he's willing to abandon me at the flip of a switch.
I'm sad to hear that. I will, and I hear how unfair it sounds. Um, Again, I don't know him, so I'm going to go completely on conjecture. But I would imagine that he did not like that he had an anxious relationship. That he I would imagine he felt needy, and so after he ended those relationships, he became more guarded and he became more cautious, and so now he's put up a big old wall around himself and said, I'm not gonna connect with people, and then when it gets really hard, I'm out. He also might have what we call a disorganized attachment style, which is anxious and avoidant. So you're hearing how, and you're hearing how he was with previous relationships, but we might not have the entire story. He might have been really anxious in some moments and then completely avoidant, as you've just described in other moments. And so he goes back and forth between the two. And people who have had a lot of trauma tend to do that. And part of that is I'm wanting connection. I'm craving connection. I'm really worried that you're going to leave me, but then in order to protect myself from you actually leaving me or abandoning me, then I'm gonna run out before you do to me. All of that is shame based. Everything you described is shame based. I would imagine he does not feel very great about himself, and so he's not able to have a secure attachment with himself nor you, because he's so afraid. He's being driven by fear no matter what. The challenge for you is that he pulls away and then you become the pursuer. So there's a pattern that's going with that. So it might be helpful to go to an emotionally focused couples therapist who can help you guys understand how that pattern plays out and what you can do to shift that pattern so that another outcome could be better. But that's what I'm guessing is going on with him.
Yeah, I was thinking, wow, your head must just be, kind of going, what? And so, broken record here. What are you doing to take care of you? What are your healthy boundaries? That is not okay. That kind of behavior. So, what do you have set in place so that when he does this, because he'll do it again, that I'm going to take a time out. I'm not abandoning you. I'm going to go over here and do whatever it is that you're doing, but you're taking care of you regardless of what he's doing or not doing. I'm also kind of curious how far, since discovery, like, is this like, oh, he's only a couple weeks or months into this, or you've been doing this little really negative dance, for a couple of years where he, continues to do this. So some of those things, are really relevant. Somebody new on a sobriety path has very little, bandwidth and very little skills. The more we're leaning into recovery work, the faster that engages. So for you, I think the betrayed partner group next week, but really the boundaries groups that started in April, there's one in April and in May. And unlike most of our work groups where you need to take part one in order to take part two, these two you can pick and choose and do one or the other or both. And so take a look at those. I've included the link in there, but it feels like, you setting yourself up so that you're not on this, emotional pendulum based on what he's doing or not doing, could be helpful for you. Okay. 20-year relationship and 2 years ago, multiple disclosures surfaced spanning entire relationship. 2 years separated while we worked on our own therapy. Recently decided to merge our lives back together again. Two very different people now. Where do we even begin to repair our attachment? Started couples therapy. Wow, thank you for sharing this. That's a really interesting situation to realize, okay, we're way different than the two people that separated 2 years ago.
It kind of makes me excited for you both. Um, so part of this is recognizing that that old relationship is gone. The old one that you had, it doesn't exist anymore. And if you haven't already, then to find a way to grieve that, and maybe you've had during the 2 years that you were separated, but both of you finding a way to grieve that. As you just said, you are two different people now. So the relationship that you are hopefully going to have in the future is not going to be the same as the one in the past. And I'm assuming that both of you were doing your work during those 2 years, and so you've hopefully become healthier people with a whole lot more tools in your bag to be able to work through conflict and those kind of things. And so first is grieving that, and then really starting to explore, well, what do we want this relationship to be like? John Gottman talks about having a set of core values. What are the values that you two share in your relationship, and letting that be the foundation of where you want this relationship to go. So really exploring what do we value in this new relationship? What's going to be the most important? And there's different ways that you can do that. You can just Google values list, and you'll find a ton of different websites that have that. And then you circle what you feel like are your top 10 values, and then he circles what his top 10 values are. I'm assuming his, but it could be her. And then you both see how many of those match up and talk about why you picked the ones you picked, and see how many of them maybe are not exactly the same but have a lot in common, and use that as a grounding starting point. And really looking at how are we going to do this differently, not focusing on the past so much, but what are we going to do differently? What are the commitments that we're going to make to each other now? How are we going to keep our lines of communication open? What are we going to do when I'm feeling scared? What am I going to do when I'm when I'm struggling, and how are we going to be able to tell each other that in a way that works? And so creating what John Gottman calls some rituals of that. A lot of couples will do fan house as a ritual for them, but that's not the only kind of ritual that people have. So just what what is it that we want this new relationship to look like? What do we value? And how do we keep the lines of communication open so that we can create this together? And I love that you're going to couples therapy. I'm sure your therapist will walk you through some of that. Oh, you're on mute.
because I keep coughing. But yeah, I was talking to an addict partner yesterday, and he was like, I don't even know. It was like, I don't know myself, and I was like, well, there's a place to start because, like, like some of the things we do are patterns, and you were kind of referencing, that's, like going back to the old or just trying to, like, let's step into the same patterns, will not serve two new people, well, so understanding who each of you are individually and then sharing that, it's almost like dating again. It's like you're starting with this new person and you have the opportunity to you know create what you really want, not fall back into old patterns of well, we always do this on Wednesday night because that's what we've always done, like having the opportunity to examine it, I guess, is and see, does this still fit for who we are now? But yeah, I'm super excited for you that you're choosing to move forward, and I'm sure there will be speed bumps along the way, but if you're committed to this, you guys can navigate that and have a better relationship than you ever had before. So the trade here, I have anxious attachment once I'm involved in a relationship. Prior to it, I'm kind of avoided, and after lying infidelity in a relationship, I'm anxious on the outside and disorganized on the inside. He's nodding his head. This pattern is any relationship, not just romantic, but especially in romantic relationships. How do I practice loving detachment as an anxiously attached person? That's complicated, or maybe it's
Yeah.
easy. I don't know.
Well, I'm hearing what you're saying is like I don't want to be so anxious and worried, but I want to be detached from that anxiousness, but I also don't want to be so standoffish that I can't have a relationship. So how do I really get to a secure place? So part of when we look at anxiety and you think about how we normally treat anxiety, anxiety comes from a thought that we're having about a particular situation. And the thought usually is not accurate. And we tend to want to make it blow out of proportion. When you've had trauma, like lying and infidelity, it's not that hard for especially the shadows of shame that I talk about, the impotent one in particular, to say, oh my gosh, this is going to be the worst. We should not be in this relationship. This is probably going to be doomed for life, and this person's never going to be honest. And even if it's not a romantic relationship, it's like I'm not even sure that I can trust my friends. They're probably going to not stick around, or I'm not sure they're going to keep their mouths shut. And so all of a sudden we have all these stories running through our minds. So the impotent one is the voice of doom. When we're talking about the shadows of shame, you think about Eeyore in Winnie the Pooh. He's Eeyore's the impotent one, like nothing I do ever matters. It's never going to be okay, and you probably aren't going to even notice anything. So, if you're feeling anxious, I'm willing to bet that who's hijacking you in that moment is the impotent one. And so, what I try to have my clients do is imagine what that character looks like. If I were going to pull that out of my head and have it in the room with me, what would it look like? And what kind of things would it say? How old is it? Is it a male, female? Is it even a human? How big or small is it? And then kind of stepping a couple of steps back and looking at it and saying, wow, I've been listening to you a lot, and just exploring what that dynamic has been like for me to been listening to this impotent one for so long, and it's just fueling the fear, right? And then you could ask it, so what are you really worried is going to happen to me by telling me not to lean in and not to have any relationships and any other, what are you really worried? And he'll tell you, the impotent one will tell you, well, I'm afraid you're going to be betrayed again. I'm afraid you're going to be rejected. I'm afraid you're going to be abandoned. And then you can say, well, thank you. I'm so glad that you are trying to take care of that, but I'm a grown up. Let me figure out what I can do if that happens. And we start to have a game plan, an exit strategy of how we're going to work through if something happens. Who can I reach out to? Who's on my list of contacts that I can have that will be there for me? How can I connect with maybe a higher power? How can I connect with my own sense of self that it's going to be all right? I have what it takes. And so that's a lot of work that I just said in like a minute. But that's part of how you do that, is to be able to recognize that. And then lastly, when you're looking at this person, is this somebody you actually want to have a relationship with? Maybe you don't, and that's okay too. But is it somebody I want to develop a friendship with? Is it somebody I want to develop a romantic relationship with? Okay, so I'm afraid. Can I be kind to myself and recognize that's pretty normal, especially with what I've gone through, and make sure that I find some tools to help me with that?
So you mentioned like who's on my contact list, but this person shares this pattern is in any relationship. So this feels, like how do you even start being willing to go, okay, I'm gonna try to trust this person and not as soon as you even perceive that something happens, go, yep, doesn't work. How do you keep those voices at bay?
Well, first you have to recognize them. That's why I give them names, right? So I give the shadows of shame names so that I can call them out. And I'm like, hey, there you are. I see you. And that in and of itself is powerful, because it gives you a little bit of objectifying, like a objective point of view. Like you're stepping back a little bit and you're like, hey, wait a minute. And another thing that I'll ask people is like, would you ever say that to your loved one? Would you ever say to your daughter or your son, "Oh my gosh, never have a friendship ever again. Don't trust anybody. You need to figure out how to be alone for the rest of your life." Would you say that to somebody you love? And they're like, "No." Okay, so what is happening that's the story that keeps being told to me? What am I trying to protect myself from? And how can I respond to that fear in a way that's loving and compassionate?
And I did put, because somebody else was asking about how to find you and some resources. So I did include your Finding Peace website. And there are resources on there specifically to consider. And I've shared before, I went to one of his live retreats and like I already had an idea of some of the stuff, but wow, then you get to meet more of your voices of shame and go, I don't even want to have that one. And, but to take ownership of it, be able to identify it, and just like you're saying, try to go, yep, there it is. And, I recognize that that's showing up, but it gives me the opportunity to move it to my, thinking part of my brain and not just have to have this emotional bundle of, you know, reacting, which never works out well for me. So, okay. Um, Okay, I've been finding that I relapse as an escape after certain thoughts of about. Oh, I'm sorry. I have been finding that I relapse after as an escape after certain thoughts of doubt around performing well on my job in the future or being able to handle a very uncomfortable relationship situation. It's always felt as though I don't trust myself to handle pain, fear, or abandonment. How can I develop safety and confidence within myself to believe that I have the tools to meet my own needs?
I love that question. So thank you for asking that. So it's similar to what we were just talking about. You have an impotent one too, right? And your impotent one is saying all kinds of stuff about you don't have, you have a judge and an impotent one. The judge is like, you don't have what it takes. You're not rising to the occasion. You're not enough. There's something seriously wrong with you. And then your impotent one is like, yes, and it's going to be bad. And you're never going to be able to show up. And you're not ever going to be able to manage that stuff. And so that shame is part of what's driving your acting out, because you're not actually addicted to whatever your acting out behavior of choices. You're actually addicted to the shame because you don't actually believe, like you just said, that I have what it takes, that I have the tools and abilities. You don't actually believe that about yourself. And so because of that, then we continue to behave in a way that proves that I don't, right? So uh, that's where most addicts start, and that's okay. I love that you're asking that. And you've already identified what the issue is, that you don't trust yourself. So the way that we build trust is through our behaviors. So I make a commitment to myself, and maybe it's not the commitment that I'm going to be sober today. Maybe it's that I'm going to tell the truth today, some small thing. I'm going to do some small thing and I'm going to hold myself accountable to that. And then I do it. And I'm like, wow, I did it. And let's celebrate that. And then I'm going to do it again. That's why in the rooms we talk about being sober one day at a time, right? I don't know if I'm going to be sober for the rest of my life, but I can make a commitment to myself that I am going to be sober for this next 24 hours. And if that seems too daunting, well, then I'm going to make a commitment that I'm going to be sober for the next 2 hours. And then I'm going to call somebody and I'm going to celebrate that I did it for 2 hours. And then I'll talk about how did I do that? I'm going to process how did I do that? So part of this is not doing it all by yourself. That's why we have sponsors. That's why we have 12-step meetings. We have drop-in groups, and we have therapists, and we have friends and family members and all that stuff. So that we aren't just trying to do this all by ourselves. Um, so being able to say, okay, I learned a tool today. I want to practice that tool this week. Let me see if I can strengthen that tool. So I learned a tool that I need to name my emotions. So let me practice what my emotions are this week. Or I learned a tool that I have an impotent one that's telling me that I'm not enough. Let me practice journaling what my response would be to that. So all of that is just building up your muscles, and to help yourself come to the conclusion through evidence that you actually can trust yourself. And so you're on the right track. And I'm so proud of you for that.
Yeah, I love doing I call it the relapse autopsy. It's like, okay, here's what's happening, but it's, backing up, and and like Troy said, you identified it. So, if I'm looking at this, I'd be in my middle circle is, I'm starting to have doubts, I'm not feeling well about, my job. I'm future tripping, and recovery. Like we talk about it all the time in 12 steps, you live in the present, you can't undo the past. Tomorrow you don't know, you live in the present. So the wallowing in the past or future tripping, neither one serve us. But you have lots of information to go. These all should be in my middle circle, my yellow circle. And when this is happening, I bet you start feeling it in your body. I bet you have awarenesses, and if you're paying attention, which is what recovery we have to do. We, just kind of mindlessly, compulsively did things. So, but if we're intentional, you're going to go, oh, wait, there it is, and all of the tools you have, calling a sponsor, doing whatever, and the first time you do that and you go, wow, interrupted the system, great, then you have more confidence that you can do it again. So, but I love that you're here and asking so many resources. So, dig in, again, the work group starts with Troy in a few weeks. Join, and I put the link in there. Super helpful. Okay, next question, Troy. Do you have groups or workshops coming up for women or betrayed partners? The work you do with the parts you're able to help that addicts access and group is amazing. As the retreat I attended was, for anybody. It was not, just for betrayed partners. I did put a link in the chat for his website, and it does have his offering separately and differently that is very specifically for betrayed partners. Is our Empowered Women's Retreat. I just found out it's going to be in May instead of April. I put the link in, check out both of those and see what's a fit. They're very different, both great opportunities. You could do both, but the betrayed partner retreat, the Empowered Women's Retreat, is specifically only for female betrayed partners. There's a breath work, and it's not just mindfulness breath work, but grief work, boundary work, anger processing, grief, all of those things, that is very specific to that. Then separately, and like I said, I participated in Troy's, highly recommend that. But that's the voices of shame and how that's showing up, and those attachment wounds. So I mean, honestly, you could benefit from both of them, if you have the ability to do both. So but check them out. You can reach out to Troy or to me if you've got questions about any of those. But I love that here's what I really love. You're asking to continue the journey and do the deeper work. Yay. Those are the people that don't get stuck in in the mire of the quicksand of addiction. How's that? And recovery. Okay, anything you want to add to that?
I, I do offer different things all the time. If you go to Finding Peace Consulting and sign up for the free Finding Peace 5-day challenge, then when offerings come out, you'll get an email that lets you know when things are happening. And I do things for partners, and I do things for people who are not even struggling with addiction. So if you go to findingpeaceconsulting.com and sign up for that, you can get more information.
Yes, and the link is in your chat, so you can just click on that if you're joining live. So okay, I want to be in my power. I know what that feels like in the moment, in the environment, in a situation. I just don't know how to activate it at my will. I give away so much of my power, my choices, and my hopes to others and my fears, remaining in functional freeze day after day. I have high anxiety, perfectionism, moral perfectionism, highly sensitive, and low self confidence. What parts do I need to acknowledge, and how do I get out of this stuck place? It affects me, my career, my relationships, my hobbies, my goals, and my life overall.
I would say that that's the judge. So the judge is the voice that is always assessing you. And so think about if you've ever had some jewelry assessed, or your house was on the market, and so they have somebody come evaluate your house and tell you how much it's worth. Well, that's what the judge is doing, but the conclusion the judge comes up with every time is that you are worth less. You are not perfect enough. You have flaws and defects, and therefore you are unworthy of love, success, praise, gratitude, any of that stuff. So as you're saying, I live in this functional freeze, this moral perfection, you're not good enough. So the judge will say, you're not religious enough. You're not Christian enough. You're not a good person enough. You've made that mistake. You thought that bad thought. There's something seriously wrong with you. You're too sensitive. Why are you being so sensitive? You should have let that go. So the words that the judge likes to use a lot are should and shouldn't. You shouldn't have done that, or you should have done that. So recognizing that, and like we've said today, I want to draw a picture. And if you are having a hard time conceptualizing what that judge looks like, one of the activities I have people do is imagine that you got a phone call from the judge and you were listening to what the judge said. Does the judge sound like a guy's voice? Does it sound like a woman's voice? Is it harsh? Is it soft? Is it loud? Is it quiet? And then say, imagine that I turned FaceTime on and I could see the judge talking to me on my phone. What would I see? And then draw that. And then put that picture like 10 feet away from you. And then just imagine the kind of things that it says to you. And you're going to listen to it in second person instead of first person. So first person is I suck, I'm no good, I'm not a good human. Second person is Troy, you suck, you're not a good human, there's something wrong with you. And just turning it into second person gives you a little bit of a gap to be able to say, whoa, like that's not nice. That's not kind. And then you can say, okay, so what are you telling me this for? You are really worried about something for me. And for me, it always stems back to the attachment wounds, that they're always afraid that you're going to experience one of these wounds. Like you're going to experience loss, or you're going to experience neglect, or you're going to be rejected, or someone's going to abandon you, or someone's going to betray you, or someone's going to hurt you. And so the judge thinks And this is the key thing about the judge is if you are perfect enough, then none of this stuff will happen to you. And that's just not reality. And, there are some people who are listening who are Christian. And so I use this example to them because they believe in Jesus Christ. It's not religion, but the belief that Christians have is that Jesus was perfect. And yet all six of these things happened to him. So if the Son of God had bad things happen to him, or Buddha had bad things happen to him, or whatever good person on the planet had bad things happen to them, then that's the lie that the judge is saying is that if you're perfect, no bad things will happen to you. And that's just not the reality. And so once we see that, I'm like, oh, but you're trying to protect me from that. Well, how can I protect myself from that in a way that's helpful? Maybe I can have some boundaries. Maybe I can practice self-compassion. Maybe I can reach out to a friend and say, hey, I'm having a hard day. I'm really struggling today. Maybe I can go to a therapist and work on some of the irrational core beliefs that have been driving my life. Maybe I can reach out to a sponsor. Like, there's a lot of different things we can do. But first is like, you need to knock that off, Judge, because you actually are causing me more harm than good.
I was thinking when you're talking to, it's like, would you say those things to a friend like, Troy, you suck, I mean, like
Yeah.
you just wouldn't do that. And we do that to ourselves. And yes, for all of the reasons you just described, but I was like, wow, it does sound so harsh. And I love that you said, put it in second person. So there's a little bit of distance, but I just go like, would my friend, a real friend, say those things to me? No. And then why would I do that to myself? For all of those reasons, trying to protect. So, yeah. So, and I do like as soon as I was like, oh yeah, there they are. So, thanks for sharing. Okay, we've been in separate counseling. This goes back to the earlier one. We've been in separate counseling for 8 months and are very close to disclosure. Sex addiction has spanned 63-year period. He is still gaslighting and avoiding difficult conversations. Obviously, I have been in this marriage for life, but I don't see improvement. I no, but I don't see improvement I can live with. Can he change? I'm filing for legal separation. So I'm going to put a plug in. That's a long time, and that is not like if he's going to 12-step meetings every day, which I love, and doing seeing a CSAT once a week, that's helpful but not enough. If he's doing our online, if he's doing all of that, I mean, recovery takes 2 to 5 years, and with somebody with that long of a history, it's probably more than the 2 years. That said, we have an expert residential treatment program that has helped guys, and we've had guys over 80-year-old come to us and get help, and change, so because our expert team has the ability to dig down and get things. And so we've had, couples that are, on the brink of whatever, and going like, yeah, I want to be with you, but not like this. And he's gotten the help he needs. She's gotten the help and support she needs, and they're on a different path, not magical, just like Troy was saying, it doesn't make everything all better. It's like bad stuff is still going to happen, but there's a clear direction. So I'm going to pull the treatment information, put that in the chat for you to consider, but and absolutely divorce is fine. I will throw one more thing, Troy. We did a 4-part series on should I stay or should I go. Super helpful. Lots of people have found that, and there's no judgment. Everybody gets to make their own choices, but you may find that also helpful as you're discerning what you need to do for you. So I'm going to go look for those things. And what is your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts?
Well, so he's had a pattern of dishonesty for longer than 63 years, I would imagine.
Correct.
So that's a pattern and a habit that he's going to have to learn how to break. How can he change? Well, there's the joke. How many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? Well, one, but the light bulb has to want to change, right? And so that's the key is, yeah, I absolutely believe that all of us can change. I wouldn't do this job if I didn't believe that change was not possible. Is it hard? Yeah. Are there some really challenging parts to this recovery thing? Yeah. But I do believe he can change if he wants to. But that's part of his journey. And then you have part of your journey of of what you've identified, and that you just don't see that you can live with the gaslighting and the lying and all of that stuff. And that's a boundary that you have. That's something you're doing for you. Um, I'm sorry, you're coughing. It's okay. So I love that you're here. So like, there's some things he needs to do, and hopefully you can get some support for you while he's doing those. The inpatient treatment program, I've had lots of guys who've told me how valuable that is, and surprisingly, a lot of them are in their 60s and 70s and 80s. And I'm so proud of them for finally deciding that now's the time to work on this thing that I haven't wanted to even admit that I had. So there's hope, and you need to do what's right for you too.
Yes, I hit the wrong button. I meant to mute so you didn't hear me cough, and I hit the wrong one. So that's what happens when I don't have my glasses on. So I did put those links in, about residential treatment. Happy to answer any questions. And also the 4-part webinar series on should I stay or should I go? Even starting with with Kristen Snowden's webinar on, there's 10 questions and like, do I like this person? I mean, it's like it goes on and you can journal about that. You can share with your therapist, and just kind of see, where you're at with things. Do you see that there's, hope for the future and that you want to do that? That said, you guys have been together a really long time. So co-parenting, co-grandparenting, all of that, just navigating that space, I mean, if you have children and grandchildren, but navigating that space, like being at a place where you have some peace about who you are and where you're at, I would hope would be the goal. We've had women who have come to the Empowered Women's Retreat who have been left. One was even a widow, that I recall that, so that's about healing for you, so regardless of what happens with him, I hope you'll consider that for you. Okay. Betrayed partner here. Is it common for the betraying partner to make very little progress for a long time, close to 2 years, and then suddenly be like 90% more reliable and seemingly get it? I'm hopeful that it's all the pieces kind of coming together after working with therapists for the last 2 years, but worried that it's a boom bust cycle. How can I tell the difference? This is a great question. What do you think?
Well, you can tell the difference by his behavior. So, is it common? Yes. You know, uh, what I mean by that is like when a guy finally decides, "Oh my gosh, I need help," and then they really decide that they want to do this, and they jump both feet in, and they're doing all the things, and they make the decision. I've seen guys do some tremendous turnaround, and it's beautiful to watch. The challenge for them is con maintaining it, right? A lot of us get into I call it the shame two-step, where my judge tells me that I need to be better, that I'm not trying hard enough, that I'm flawed, and my recovery is really lousy, and I need to try better. And so I go into this like control phase of me, like I'm gonna go to every 12-step meeting there is on the planet, and I'm going to read out of my recovery material, and I'm going to go to my therapist, and I'm going to check in with my wife, and then I'm going to make sure that I have quality time with all of my kids, and then I'm going to go to the gym, and then all of a sudden I try that for a couple of days, and it's like, whoa, I am exhausted. I don't think I can do this. And so then I stop and I slide it over into the relapse phase, or the um this relaxing phase, and I'm like, oh, I can relax for a little bit. I can do that. And I'll stay there for a while until my judge starts poking me and says, hey, you got to try harder. You got to try harder. And then I go back and forth and back and forth. And that's exhausting. And that's not what recovery really looks like. Recovery is one step at a time, me doing the meaningful, mindful work of being the best human I can be today. And if I mess up, I'm going to own it, and then I'm going to check in again. So yes, it's common for guys to do that. And it's also common for them to slip back. But I have seen guys who when they finally do put some of the pieces together, they're like, yes, I like how I feel when I'm doing this. I like that I feel I'm in integrity. I like that I'm not lying to my wife. I like how my body is feeling and that I'm not carrying shame around. And I want that to continue. And the only way that you can tell the difference is that that pattern continues next week and next month and next year. That's the only way. Their words are never going to be enough to tell you the difference. It's their behavior.
Yeah, and I was thinking the same thing, and I do, and it's across, all forms of addiction. When all of those things start to become integrated into all areas of our life, it is kind of like the puzzle pieces are starting to come together. Don't get me wrong, there's still puzzle pieces sitting out there. We don't have our puzzle all together, but we are more and more congruent. We're able to show up, consistently in all areas of our life. And yeah, the pendulum swing that Troy was trying, I was like, yep, I get that, and it's crazy making for us and for everyone else when we're just, flying through the middle of balance. The more we're doing the recovery work, the more we're able to, be kind of in that middle area and not just, swinging through it. So, and it does take time, but 2 years in, yeah, you should be seeing, some more hopeful signs of, being able to trust on more levels, not 100%, for sure, he's betrayed before. But here's the deal. I think you can better trust yourself that you'll be able to pick up when you'll go, wait, this is not okay, and lips moving and saying, I'm all fine and I'm doing, you're going to go, no, the behaviors are showing me different. So, I get, the anxiety around it, and also going like, you guys have worked really hard to get to this place. So, there's more peaks and valleys, but, for the moment, maybe going like, wow, we're doing the work and it's starting to show up, in a really meaningful way for our relationship, and savor it to the degree you can. I'm more spiritual than religious, but your example of how bad things happened to Jesus and Buddha, even though they led heart led lives. So the judge of perfectionism, trying to prevent bad things from happening to them, both unreasonable, unnecessary. That was incredibly impactful to me. I think it is also helpful. It will also help me with the anger and despair I have around the injustice I feel when bad things happen to children and innocent people. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, and it was interesting to think of, and and even taking, like like you said in that example, Jesus was perfect, you know, and there's not a human being on the planet that is. And why would I think that, well, if I just try harder, all of a sudden I'm going to be perfect? That's one of the things I love about the 12 step. There's an ability to make amends. So when, and it's not if, when, I need to clean something up, I have the ability to do so, which keeps me out of the shame cycle. Because otherwise I'm going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. No, I have the opportunity to try. When I said or did whatever, I and I take the ownership of it and take responsibility. And that's what recovery is, versus, living in the wild. And yeah, there's lots of injustice in life. And, you know, I have a really good therapist. And um, I was getting all caught up in, external things that I have zero control of. And she reminded me that be intentional. So it was intentional about, what kind of information was coming into me. Like I turned off the news. I turned off lots of things. I stuck to my meditations. I did the things that brought me stability and groundedness, so that I could deal with that. But yeah, I can focus on all of those things, and I have no control over them. What I do have control over, to the best of my ability, are my actions and my reactions. And that's enough of a job, so that helps. So thoughts on this one?
Well, I've been thinking as we're sitting with this, and I've had wounds of abuse, rejection, abandonment, um, that have run really deep. And I sit here and my therapist has asked me before, like, do you wish that you had never experienced those? Like, if you could turn back time, would you want to not go through those? And there's a part of me that says, yes, absolutely. I never want to experience those ever. And then there's another part of me is like, no, I wouldn't be who I am today. And I wouldn't have learned the things that I learned learn if I hadn't experienced those things. And so when that happens, and then my judge shows up and says, well, there's something seriously wrong with you, and this is going to be bad. And I'm able to sit and say, I've gone through some really hard things, and I know that this is going to be okay. And I got some support. So thank you again for trying to protect me. But I've learned some things. And so I, I've learned that I don't have to be perfect in order to find joy and love and abundance. So thank you. But I got another plan here.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, and I feel likewise. As all of the stuff I went through, I don't like the things that hurt other people. That's where I wish, but it was all part of my journey. I've done the best I can to write things that I can, and like I kept hoping, at certain points in recovery, I'd be like all wrapped up with a bow and little Miss Sen. That has not happened yet, and I don't think it
Okay.
will. And then I had this realization, um, you know, that, I'm willing to continue to do the work. I'm not coasting, and I'm willing to continue to do the work. And I like myself better than I did 2 years ago. And in 2 years, I'll be able to say the same thing if I continue to do the work. And so it is an opportunity. And yes, we all have, stuff in our lives. I wrote a blog about I like to hike. I hiked the Grand Canyon, and I took a picture of the path. And it's hard. I'm not going to lie. That's really hard. But I wrote a blog about it reminded me of my recovery journey, that it was hard, and then there were some valleys where it was and then there was water in the middle, and and but the vistas, and that there was always someone with me. I never had to hike alone, like on that. And that's been true of my journey, is there's always opportunity to connect with others. There's always the opportunity. You get through the hard and you go, wow, this is just amazing in this moment. And then there'll be another uphill, but to enjoy the moments, when you're in that. So we're in it. We believe in recovery and healing. We want to help in any way we can. Troy will be back the fourth week of March. So see ya in 4 weeks, and bring your questions and continue to join in. I mentioned earlier, Maddie Corman will be joining us for a special edition webinar on Monday. Check that out. If you haven't registered on Troy's site and on ours to get updates on things, please do so. That'll keep you in the loop for things. So thank you, Troy. Thanks everyone for the great questions. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.